My mouth spilled blood onto the chilly linoleum floor of the gynecologist's waiting area. As other patients fled in terror, my stepbrother Will loomed over me with his fists still clenched and his words resonating off the walls. He waved legal documents in my face and yelled, "Choose how you pay or get out. I'll make sure you never go back to Dad's place if you don't sign these now." As I attempted to get off the ground, the stitches from my emergency surgery 3 days prior felt like they were ripping apart. With her hands trembling as much as me, the nurse had already dialed 911. Will was unconcerned, though. He didn't. "My name is Donna Underwood, and I'm 32. I had a future 2 weeks ago. A location I called home, a loving father, and an unborn child. My stepbrother was attempting to take all my father had left me while I was bleeding on the floor of a medical facility. 3 days after Dad's funeral, everything began. I recently lost the baby. A 14-week loss that resulted in an emergency D&C because the bleeding wouldn't stop. I was fortunate to survive, according to the physicians. It's funny how frequently that word is used. Fortunate. Will and my stepmother Veronica arrived with a moving truck while I was staying at Dad's place attempting to recover both physically and mentally. They didn't knock. Will simply entered the building using his key as if it were his own. With that false expression of sympathy on her face, Veronica trailed following him. "Oh, Donna, sweetheart," she murmured. "We were informed about the infant. What a disaster." However, she was already cataloging Dad's antiques, most likely figuring out how much they would sell for. Will got right to work. He slammed a pile of papers onto the kitchen counter, where his father used to prepare his renowned Sunday pancakes. "Put your signature on these. Mom and I were left to handle everything by Dad. If you sign today, you will receive $10,000. It decreases to 5 tomorrow." I nearly burst out laughing. After my mother passed away when I was 7 years old, my father raised me by himself and turned Underwood Construction into a $10 million business. He would never leave me out of his will. I told him that was absurd. Dad's true will is what I want to see. Things became ugly at that point. Will's face took on that specific purple hue I had seen in my early years. The color that indicated an impending injury. "This is the real will," he growled. 2 weeks prior to his passing, Dad signed it. "You didn't realize he had written you off since you were too preoccupied with your pregnancy drama. Drama throughout pregnancy." He referred to it as losing my first child at 32 after 3 years of trying. I made an effort to remain composed and informed him that I needed some time to reflect and see a lawyer. Will provided me a full day. However, he was in the waiting area when I arrived to the gynecologist for my follow-up appointment. I had no idea how he found out about my appointment. However, I discovered later that Veronica had been using my phone while I was asleep. He declared loud enough for everyone to hear, "Time is up. Get out of the house today or sign now." "No," I replied. He slapped me so hard at that point that I fell to the ground. My mouth was filled with blood and I could taste copper. My ribs shouted in protest. They were still sore after the procedure. He gave me a sneer. "Do you believe that 10,000 is too much for you? All right. You now receive nothing." With lights blazing and other patients making statements, the cops came in a matter of minutes. Will tried to win them over with his typical charm. All he was upset about was the passing of his father. His stepsister was acting irrationally. Families may differ, but it's difficult to justify a woman who is bleeding on the ground and has a visible handprint on her face. He was taken into custody, but within 2 hours, Veronica freed him. The locks had been changed by the time I returned to my dad's house that night, driven by my friend Margie because I was too unsteady to drive myself. My stuff was strewn all over the front lawn. Everything: clothes, books, photo albums. Half of it had already been saturated by the neighbors' sprinklers. However, the sight of my mother's jewelry box, which my father had given her on their 10th anniversary, broken open on the driveway and her pearls strewn across the concrete like tears, broke my heart. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are viewing from and what time it is. Everything is visible to me. I sincerely appreciate your help. Margie assisted me in gathering anything we could recover from the yard. She is a 73-year-old retired forensic accountant who has been Dad's buddy for 20 years. She is as keen as a medical blade. She kept whispering, "This isn't right, honey," as we scooped up damp photo albums. "Your daddy would never do this to you." She was correct. Naturally, Dad had frequently discussed his will, particularly following his initial heart attack the previous year. He had stated the same thing every time. "You and the company's employees' pension fund share everything equally. Will, Veronica, and Donna each receive $100,000 and the Florida home. It's fair." Will, however, had different ideas. Mrs. Patterson from next door eventually plucked up the confidence to come over as we were packing my destroyed stuff into Margie's old Buick. She kept looking at the house anxiously, as if Will might suddenly leap out. "Dear Donna," she muttered, "your father was quite distraught the week before he passed away, but I didn't want to say anything at the burial. Once he came to borrow my phone. That he no longer trusted his own. Said that someone was paying attention." I couldn't stop thinking about Dad's last weeks while I slept on Margie's couch with an ice pack on my face that night. He had been exhibiting odd, reclusive, and even paranoid behavior. I had blamed his cardiac medicine for it. What if, however, it was something else? I heard glass cracking when I woke up around 3 in the morning. There was an attempt to enter Margie's home. We gathered in her bedroom with her late husband's baseball bat and dialed 911. However, the person had left by the time the cops showed up. Margie's garage door had a message spray painted on it. "Next time we visit, please stop digging." The following morning, Will showed up with barely disguised threats and phony concern. He leaned on Margie's doorframe as if he owned it and said, "I heard you had some trouble last night. The neighborhood is becoming risky. Perhaps you ought to consider relocating to a safer area, such as a different state." It didn't sit well with Margie. Henderson William. His entire name was a weapon in her hands. "I've known you since you stole from your mother's purse when you were 16. I'm not afraid of you. Before I show you what this elderly woman has in her purse, leave my property." Will really took a step back as she gave her purse a meaningful pat. Margie took out her laptop once he was gone. "Before I retired, I worked as a bookkeeper for your father's business for 15 years, honey. I still have my access codes. Your father was never very good at changing passwords. Let's investigate Will's activities." My blood ran cold at what we discovered. Will had been draining the business for the last 5 years. Ghost workers, sham corporations, and fake invoices. In the past year alone, he had stolen about $500,000. If you didn't know what to look for, the smart patterns were nearly undetectable. However, Margie was aware. She adjusted her reading glasses and added, "This is federal crime territory. Tax evasion, wire fraud, etc. But there's more, honey." She opened a second screen. "About 6 months ago, these withdrawals began to increase in size. Just when your father's heart issues were getting worse. I recalled that in just 6 months, Dad's prescription had been modified 3 times. He seemed to get worse rather than better every time. It was beyond the doctor's comprehension. Dad wasn't reacting to treatment as usual. I was completely chilled by Margie's theory. What if his medication was being tampered with? In her days as a forensic accountant, she had witnessed it before. Playing with medications. Family members rush an inheritance. At that moment, I recalled Dad's final comprehensible remarks to me while I was in the hospital. "Donna, look under the water heater in the basement safe. The birth date of your mum." He had exuded such urgency. He never woke up again when the medicine took effect. We had to enter that house. Will and Veronica had replaced the locks, but they were unaware of the basement window, the one I used to sneak through in high school, that Dad had never properly fixed. Margie and I slipped across the backyard around 2 in the morning, clothed in black like cat burglars. As I jimmied the window, Margie held the torch and muttered, "It's unbelievable that I'm breaking and entering at my age. However, until the probate process is completed, this is technically still your home, honey." Dad's scent filled the basement. wood shavings and old spices from his craft. There was a safe under the water heater, concealed by a false panel I had never seen previously. It was first opened on Mom's birthday. There were 3 items inside that completely altered the situation. A letter in Dad's wobbly handwriting, a huge folder of documentation proving Will's embezzlement, and Dad's actual will, correctly notarized and dated only a month ago. It said, "If you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct, my beloved Donna. Since Will began administering my medication, I've been feeling worse. Persisted on lending a hand following my most recent heart attack. I've been recording everything. This folder contains the company's forensic audit. Will is unaware that I employed a third party. I apologize for not being able to tell you. He keeps an eye on my calls. Have faith in Margie. Have faith in Gary Garrison. Keep them from winning. Dad, oh my love." As I read, my hands trembled. Will had been deliberately and slowly poisoning my father so that it appeared to be a natural decline. Veronica as well. I reached into the safe and took out another folder. Newspaper clippings, yellow with age, make up this older one. Margie read over my shoulder and exhaled. Oh my God! Heart issues claimed the life of Veronica's first husband. Kidney failure, second husband. Stroke, third husband. All within 3 years after getting married. Everything was left to her. The fourth husband was my father. We took pictures of everything. Then Margie saw another item. Upstairs, Will's PC remained logged in. We stealthily ascended the stairs after she recommended a quick glance. The absence of Dad made the house feel strange, as if the walls themselves were aware that something horrible had occurred. Will's email was a veritable treasure mine of foolish illegal activity. Notes to Veronica. The elderly man took his medication on schedule. This morning he drank twice as much coffee. Before the audit, send an additional 50,000. Donna is growing wary. The worst was 3 weeks ago, but we still need to move more quickly. We'll have to deal with Donna as we agreed if we can't get her to sign. Treat me the same way they treated Dad. For more tales, please hit the like button and subscribe if you're still with me. Means the world to have your support. We took everything to Dad's 30-year lawyer, Gary Garrison, the following morning. Above the old hardware store downtown was his office. Law books and wood paneling that were most likely unopened since the Clinton administration. Gary was 72. Despite being ostensibly semi-retired, his intellect remained keen. I knew it, he said, hitting his desk so forcefully that his coffee leaped. Your daddy came to me 6 weeks ago, scared out of his mind. Said Will was planning something, but he wanted evidence. I advised him to be cautious and to record everything. His expression darkened. I ought to have done more. Gary was still in touch with people everywhere. IRS investigators, judges, and federal prosecutors who owed him favors. Donna, this is significant. Didn't simply pilfer from the business, though. He embezzled money from the employees' pension fund. It's federal. Detective Riley entered the room if we could demonstrate that he was poisoning your father. She was the ideal police officer. Mid-fours, tough as nails, compassionate despite having seen too much. She shook my hand and added, Mr. Garrison called me. Something similar happened to my mother. For the inheritance, the carer was gradually poisoning her. These are personal cases for me. 4 months, Riley had been looking into Veronica. After the third husband, she came to our attention. But she's smart. The insurance companies began to inquire. Always waits a few years between marriages and shifts states frequently. Her retirement plan was meant to be your father. We developed our argument throughout the course of the following week. Using the financial documents, Margie worked her magic and discovered traces that Will believed he had concealed. Gary drafted legal pleadings that would prevent any asset transfers and freeze the estate. Riley obtained warrants for bank statements, phone data, and, above all, Dad's prescription bottles. 3 times the recommended dosage of Diane was found in the pills. Riley informed us that your father's symptoms would be exactly the same at that dosage. Fast enough to kill in a matter of months, yet slow enough to appear natural. However, we required more. Will had to confess to us. At that moment, I recalled something about my stepbrother. His ego outgrew his intelligence. He had to boast all the time. He had to be the most intelligent person in the room. Perhaps he would become reckless if I played broken and gave him the impression that he had won. I told the crew that I had to give him a call. Let him know that I'm prepared to sign. Margie appeared concerned. He's dangerous, honey. I understand, but he is also avaricious. And avarice leads to stupidity. It was a difficult call. I had to weep. Considering everything that had transpired, it was not difficult. I had to sound broken and lost. It's Donna, Will. You prevail. I am no longer able to do this. Whatever you want, I'll sign. Please give me my mother's jewelry box back. Over the phone, I could hear his smile. You finally realized what was going on, huh? I'm feeling quite giving right now. I'll give you a final offer of $20,000 if you sign everything. All right, I muttered. When? The following day. Dad's workplace. Bring anyone you wish to see it. I want this to be final and lawful. Gary grinned for the first time this week after I hung up. He's looking for witnesses. We'll provide him with witnesses. How quickly can you obtain a warrant for recording devices, Detective Riley? I contacted Will again the following morning, perfectly portraying the broken stepsister. As I spoke, my voice broke. The tears were genuine, but not for the reason he believed. I've been thinking, Will. A few weeks prior to his passing, Dad made reference to another account. Mom never made a claim on her life insurance. I don't want any problems, but perhaps we might come to a better agreement if there is more money available. The cash signs in his eyes were almost audible to me. An additional account. How much? I'm not sure. He just mentioned First National Safety Deposit Box. Mom set it up before she died, he said. Perhaps more than 100,000. Like a starving fish, Will fell for the bait. Donna, you had better not be lying to me. I'm not. I simply need enough money to move away from all of this and start afresh. He wanted to believe me, so he did. That's how greed is funny. It renders intelligent people foolish and foolish people dangerous. Will and his girlfriend, Tiffany, arrived at the residence that afternoon. She was blonde, 25, and had a laugh that could peel paint. She believed Will to be wealthy. He had been using Dad's money carelessly for her. Visits to Vegas, jewelry and designer bags. Even Veronica rolled her eyes when she called him Willie Bear while hanging on his arm. We're planning to get a yacht, Willie Bear says. Admiring herself in the hallway mirror, Tiffany let out a squeal. I've already decided on the name. Margie, who was assisting me in packing what was left, was unable to resist in Tiffany's dream. You might want to choose something shorter, honey. The letter charges the names of the boats. Tiffany gave a blink. Do they? Yes, indeed. A boat belonged to my late husband. We gave it the name Bob. Will tore the house apart in search of details on this enigmatic narrative, as Tiffany tried to determine whether Margie was kidding. In his desperation, he stormed through his father's office, hurling papers everywhere and even prying up floors. At last, he grabbed my arm firmly enough to cause bruises and shouted, "Where is it?" As I mentioned, I'm not precisely sure. Dad took a lot of medicine. All he could talk about was Mom's birthday and First National. Perhaps her name is on the safety deposit box. Will's eyes brightened. Naturally, Dad's estate documents would not have included accounts in Mom's name. He called his financial contacts right away to see if there were any accounts under my mother's maiden name. Detective Riley was developing her case in the meanwhile. Everything was being picked up by the recording devices we had set. Veronica and Will are debating how much dioxin to give Dad. They intend to sell the business to a rival for half of its worth. Even their backup plan for handling me in the event that I refused to comply. Riley told us that evening. We've had enough. However, I want them all. There's another person involved. The extra medication has been supplied by someone at the hospital. They could escape if we moved too quickly. Gary got a surprise of his own. I've been researching that. Will they assert that the notary who purportedly witnessed your father's signature 2 weeks ago, he was killed in an automobile accident. Convenient, huh? However, I located his secretary. He spent the entire week in Miami, according to her. Nothing in Pennsylvania could have been notarized. The parts were coming together. Tomorrow's meeting at Dad's office will be our opportunity to document everything. There would be covert agents working for Riley. I would have a wire on. I just needed to start while talking. You sure you're up for this, honey? Margie squeezed my hand and asked. You've already experienced a great deal. I pictured Dad being poisoned by his own stepson and slowly dying. I considered my unborn child and how the stress of everything might have contributed to the miscarriage. And before hours, I considered all the families that Veronica had ruined. I'm ready, I declared. They wanted me to decide how much to pay. They will discover the true cost of their actions tomorrow. I puked twice due to anxiety the morning of the meeting. Reminding me that I was my father's daughter, Margie pulled back my hair. He started that business from nothing. You have his strength, honey, she remarked. Will simply has his pilfered funds in a shoddy dye job. Regarding the dye job, she was correct. At the age of 35, Will's lid began to turn gray, and he has been battling it with box color ever since. It seemed especially orange today beneath the fluorescent lights in Dad's office. Dad's coffee mug was still halfway full from his last day, and the office still smelt like his cologne. With his feet propped up on the desk, Will had already taken up residence in his father's chair. Tiffany was facing the camera while taking pictures in front of her father's awards wall. Will pushed the documents over the desk and said, "Let's get this over with. Sign here, here, and here. After receiving your money, you vanish." There was his notary. Vincent was a greasy-looking man who persisted in perspiring in spite of the air conditioning. Riley showed me the surveillance pictures, and I knew who he was. A 3-time convicted felon is on parole. "Before I sign," I said, sounding more composed than I actually was, "I must be fully aware of what I'm signing." Dad always advised reading everything. Will rolled his eyes. "It's easy. You relinquish all rights to the business, the estate, and everything else. You receive $20,000 in return, and we are never required to meet again." "What about the workers at the company?" I inquired. They had agreements with Dad about profit sharing. "No longer a problem for me." Will chuckled. "Tomorrow the company will be sold. Fitzgerald Industries made a $3 million offer. I want this finished, but if we had waited, we could have received 10. It was their first admission. Everything was going through the wire. At that moment, Veronica entered with a bottle of champagne. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she replied, "For after." She gave me a phony, worried face. "Dear, how are you recovering? How traumatizing the miscarriage must have been. You know, those things can be brought on by stress. Perhaps if you hadn't battled so fiercely over the will." Instead of hurling something at her, I said, "How long have you and Will been planning this?" My father was probably initially enchanted by the sparkling sound of her laughter. "What are you planning, sweetheart? We are simply carrying out your father's desires." "Really?" "I discovered some intriguing emails between you two, so I took out my phone and pretended to check something. It has to do with dealing with the elderly man from the previous year." Will's face became purple once more. "My email was hacked by you. That's against the law." "No, when you tossed me out, your computer was still logged on." "That is simply foolish." Tiffany appeared perplexed. "What is she talking about, Willie Bear?" "Nothing, sweetie. Donna, just sign the documents." I paused after picking up the pen. "And one more thing. How did Dad actually pass away?" Veronica blurted out, "Heart failure." "You are aware of that, correct?" "Heart disease. It had nothing to do with the 3 doses of Diane you were adding to his morning coffee." There was silence in the room. Tiffany even gave up snapping selfies. Will slowly got to his feet. "I'm sure you have no idea what you're talking about. The elderly man double-dosed his coffee this morning and took his medications as scheduled." "Will, those were your words." 3 days prior to Dad's passing, Veronica received an email. The phony notary, Vincent, began to move closer to the door, But I persisted. Will, you killed him. You killed him slowly and carefully. Similar to how Veronica murdered her 3 ex-husbands. At last, Veronica's mask came off. Nothing can be proven. In fact, the tablets passed the test. Dad's real attorney has the genuine will. And the notary who allegedly saw your fictitious will. That week he was in Miami. Will came at me from across the desk, but I was prepared this time. He collided with the filing cabinet after I avoided him. Willie Bear, you little one. Tiffany let out a cry. What's going on? I assumed you inherited everything. You claimed that we were wealthy. Baby, we're wealthy. She is not telling the truth. You're not wealthy, Will. You are both a killer and a thief. And you are going to be taken into custody. The door opened at that moment. Detective Riley entered the room with a small army's worth of weapons and 6 federal agents. William Henderson and Veronica Henderson, you are being held on suspicion of murder, embezzlement, wire fraud, and approximately 15 more offenses. We will talk about these charges downtown. Will attempted to flee. Before a federal agent slammed him into Dad's beloved potted fuss. He pushed by Riley and advanced about 3 feet. There was dirt all over the place. Tiffany let out a scream. Halfway through his attempt to crawl out the window, Vincent became trapped. This is entrapment. Will spat up potting soil and yelled. I was set up by her. Riley cuffed him and said, no. For once in your life, she simply allowed you to be honest. Veronica was more intelligent. She didn't flee. Rather, she grabbed her phone to erase messages in an attempt to obliterate proof. However, the allegedly innocuous 73-year-old Margie used her purse to smash the phone out of her grasp. That's assault, Veronica yelled. Honey, I'm old and confused, Margie remarked in a kind manner. I thought it was a weapon. Tiffany, on the other hand, was completely losing it. You claim to be wealthy. She sobbed at Will. You claim to be a business owner. We were heading to Paris, you mentioned. I've already informed all of my followers. Can explain, baby. Describe. For you, I resigned from my salon job. I claim to be in a relationship with a wealthy. You have no idea how embarrassing this is. Regarding you, my mother was correct. She began striking him with the fancy purse he had purchased with pilfered funds. She was only allowed to go for a minute before being dragged back by the federal authorities. Will made one final, last-ditch effort as they pulled him out. At the doctor's office, she attacked me first. I was protecting myself. Riley showed him the CCTV footage from the gynecologist's office after taking out her phone. Do you mean this particular video? The one in which you strike a woman recuperating from surgery. The one where your attacker was seen by 6 witnesses. That assault. Will's face turned white instead of purple. Still trapped in the glass, Vincent began to cry. Attracted by the disturbance, the staff had assembled outside Dad's office. Some of them began to cry when they saw Will in handcuffs, but those were tears of relief. In fact, Margaret from accounting cheered. Tom, Dad's foreman for 20 years, said, "Is it true? Did he really kill Mr. Underwood?" Gave a nod. Additionally, Tom needed to be forcibly stopped from pursuing Will. When nobody else would have given me a chance, that man did. He covered the cost of my daughter's cancer treatment. It was then that I realized how many lives my father had impacted. Narrative after tale emerged. Will had been preparing to ruin everything for a quick $3 million. He had prepared for college tuition, medical expenses, and second chances. It was a circus trial. Will tried 3 different attorneys, all of whom left when they saw how much evidence we had against him. He would have spent 20 years in prison for the financial offenses alone. However, it was not the case with the murder charge. It was expertly laid out by the prosecutor. For 5 years, Will had been stealing from the business. But Dad needed a long-term fix when he became suspicious. Veronica, who had already traveled this path, enters. The prosecutor revealed that the defendant's stepmother had an intriguing history of heart problems and spouses. He displayed a chart. After 2 years of marriage, her first husband, Robert Miles, passed away from a heart attack and left her $500,000. After 3 years, Anthony Garrett, her second husband, died of kidney illness and left her $1.2 million. Peter Kalinske, the third husband. After an 18-month stroke, she was left with $2 million. Douglas Underwood is the fourth victim. Roughly $10 million in net worth. Digitalis poisoning administered over a period of 6 months was the cause of death. The courtroom let out a gasp. Subpoenaed to testify, Tiffany appeared on the witness stand dressed more for a nightclub than a courthouse. Her testimony was inadvertently terrible. She looked at her fingernails and replied, "Will told me his stepfather was dying anyway. He claimed they were only assisting him to avoid suffering. He promised us $10 million, but he also stated it was merciful. I didn't ask any questions. Should I have asked questions? I asked too many questions, according to my former partner." Will's expression while her testimony was striking. His attorney appeared to want to crawl under the table each time she spoke. The discovery of Veronica's storage facility, however, was the big revelation. Trophies, souvenirs from each deceased husband, wedding bands, timepieces, and, most unsettling of all, medical records demonstrating that she had thoroughly investigated their ailments prior to getting married. Because the drugs were simpler to alter, she deliberately targeted men with cardiac issues. There were also my father's medical records. Written in her own hand. Raise the dosage on Tuesday. Change the Thursday tablets. Next week is the final increment. She had meticulously plotted his demise. Gary then took the stand with the letter my father had left me and his actual will. When he read the section about Dad knowing he was being poisoned but wanting to gather enough evidence to protect me, the judge literally had to call a break. Gary's voice broke as he replied. He died getting justice for his daughter. He was aware of what they were doing, but he also knew that they would find another means to harm Donna if he took action too quickly. So he put up with it. He collected proof. He was a hero when he died. Regarding the employee pension fund that Will had been depleting, the foreman from Dad's business testified. We were promised that money for retirement by Mr. Underwood. A few of us spent 30 years working there. Our futures were being stolen by Will Henderson. During the trial, 3 more families came forward. Although they never had evidence, they had accused Veronica of being involved in the killings of their loved ones. There was a pattern. She would locate affluent widowers with illnesses, get married to them right away, and they would pass away in 3 years. Everything is always left to her, and the causes are always natural. According to one of her sons, she is a black widow. I couldn't prove she killed my father, but I know now that I was correct. Will's gambling debts also surfaced. He owed some extremely dangerous individuals over $1 million. He was desperate to sell the business quickly because of this. Big Eddie sent Will texts threatening to shatter his kneecaps if he didn't pay, according to the prosecution. The prosecutor came to the conclusion that William Henderson did more than simply steal from a business. He killed more than just a decent man. He wrecked a family, deceived a father who had reared him, and attempted to deprive honest workers of their futures. All out of greed. The jury deliberated for precisely 43 minutes. Guilty in every way. Will received a life sentence for the murder in addition to 25 years for the federal counts. He literally passed out when they read the decision. Have to be done on a stretcher. I'm totally writing a book about this, declared Tiffany, who was observing from the gallery. I had a murderous relationship. Call Netflix, please. Veronica was sentenced to 30 to life for several killings. She did not recoil when they sentenced her. I'll appeal, she answered with a chilly smile. She is not going to prevail. After receiving a 5-year sentence for fraud, Vincent, the fictitious notary, offered to testify about all the other crimes Will had committed with him. It turns out that Will has been forging paperwork and operating a full side business. His sentence was extended by an additional 10 years. But punishment wasn't the only aspect of justice. It had to do with restoration. With the right management and without Will's theft, the business was rescued. In actuality, it was worth closer to $15 million than we had anticipated. The workers received interest-bearing restoration of their pension fund. When Margaret from accounting learnt that she could still retire next year, she sobbed for an hour at her desk. Gary and I had a letter from Dad that could only be opened following the trial. There was a key and an unfamiliar address inside. This was set up years ago by your father. Gary clarified that he was aware of Will's problems and that Veronica posed a threat. His insurance coverage was this. There was another safety deposit box at the address. This one is in a bank on the other side of town. There was a note for my grandchildren and $2 million in bonds. I wanted them to know that their grandfather loved them, even though I might not live to see them. Additionally, tell them about their granny. Inform them that they are descended from powerful people. In that bank vault I sobbed for an hour. After receiving praise, Detective Riley used the notoriety to form a task team dedicated to elder abuse and inheritance fraud. The police school made reading the so-called Underwood case mandatory. Margie also had her moment of glory. She received an award from the forensic accounting community for her efforts in exposing Will's embezzlement. Wearing a t-shirt that read, "Old ladies know everything," she accepted it. And received a standing ovation. The best thing was that Will's prison was well known. Men who mistreated women or the elderly were not well received by them. Will had done both. Every day, his fellow prisoners made sure he was aware of their anger. After 6 months, he wrote me a letter pleading for pardon, saying Veronica had tricked him and that he had no intention of things being this bad. I returned it with a note, unopened. Returned to the sender. This address does not have such a person. Underwood Construction was doing well 6 months after the trial. After learning Dad's business from the ground up, I discovered that I had his intuition. Dad had been dreaming of building the new children's hospital for years, and we were awarded the contract to do it. I wore my father's old hard hat and stood where he would have stood the morning we broke ground. The foreman, Tom, gave me a shoulder squeeze. Donna, he would be very proud. In the most unlikely place, I had also discovered love. My emergency physician on the night of the miscarriage was Dr. Nathan Brooks. He had testified during the trial on my wounds from Will's attack as well as the surgery. Then he came to see how I was doing. Ensured that I was recovering. Dinner became coffee. Dinner evolved into something more. He was not at all like Will. Where Will was aggressive, gentle. Where Will was dishonest, I was honest. Whenever you're ready or never, if that's what you need, I'm here for you, not for what you can give me, he said, holding me when I told him I was afraid to try for another child after everything. Gary and Margie were witnesses when we got married in court. Straightforward, truthful, and genuine. I drove to my father's grave the day I discovered I was pregnant once more. I had brought a piece of his favorite lemon cake and his favorite beer for his birthday. I said, "We did it, Dad," to the headstone. We managed to get them. The business is secure. The workers are looked after. And Will never leave. Veronica too. The trees were rustling in the breeze. And I thought I smelt his fragrance for a split second. Dad, I'm expecting a baby. Nathan is a decent man. He would have appealed to you. Before signing contracts, he actually reads them. I chuckled while crying. I'm also learning forensic accounting from Margie. I'm a natural, she says. I must have also taken that from you. I got up to go, but then I turned around again. They believed I was frail. Dad assumed I would just give up and let them win because I was mourning and hurt. I felt my still flat stomach, where hope and fresh life were blossoming. They were, in spite of everything that had attempted to destroy it.